Eyamoja, the river's wrath. Once upon a time, in a faraway village hidden deep in the forest, there was a sacred river called Eyamoja. The villagers believed the river was home to a powerful water goddess. Her name was Eyamoja, and she protected the village, but she had one strict rule. No strangers were allowed to enter the village. The people feared and respected the goddess. They made offerings at the riverbank, sang her praises, and obeyed her commands. It was said that breaking her rule would bring terrible punishment. But life in the village went on peacefully until the day one man returned from the city, bringing a visitor. His name was Ayo, a kind and brave young man who had left the village many years ago to find work in the city. While living there, he fell in love with a beautiful woman named Teni, who was gentle and full of laughter. Ayo wanted to marry Teni, so he decided to bring her to his village to meet his family. Ayo knew about the goddess's rule, but he thought, how can Eyamoja be angry if my love for Teni is pure? He believed the goddess would understand. So, hand in hand, Ayo and Teni walked into the village, excited to meet his family. The villagers were shocked when they saw Teni. Whispers filled the air, a stranger. Here, does Ayo not know the dangers? But before anyone could warn him, the sky darkened and the ground began to shake. Far away, deep in the river, Eyamoja opened her glowing blue eyes. She was furious. A stranger had entered her village. With a wave of her hand, she sent out her messenger, a giant black python that walked on water. Its eyes burned like fire, and its hiss echoed across the land. That night, the python slithered through the village, destroying everything in its path. It knocked down huts, trampled farms, and chased people from their homes. The villagers screamed and ran, but the python was unstoppable. Everyone knew this was Eyamoja's punishment. The next morning, the villagers gathered in fear and confusion. They went to the village chief, an old man named Baba Ifa, to ask for answers. Baba Ifa went to the sacred shrine to seek guidance from the spirits. When he returned, his face was heavy with sorrow. Eyamoja is angry, Baba Ifa said. She demands a sacrifice. The stranger must be offered to her, or the python will destroy us all. The villagers' hearts sank. They did not want to harm Teni, but they were more afraid of Eyamoja's wrath. That evening, a group of men went to Ayo's house. They dragged Teni from his arms, tied her hands, and placed her in a canoe. Ayo begged them to stop, but they would not listen. We must save the village, they said. As the canoe reached the middle of the river, the men pushed Teni into the water. The villagers watched in silence, their hearts filled with sadness and fear. The river bubbled and churned, and then everything went still. Teni was gone. Days passed. The python stopped attacking, and the village became calm again. But Ayo was heartbroken. He stayed by the riverbank, calling Teni's name and hoping she would return. Then, on the seventh day, something incredible happened. As the sun set over the river, a figure appeared on the water. It was Teni. She was walking on the surface of the river, her body glowing like the moon. The villagers gasped and fell to their knees. Teni had returned, but she was not the same. Her eyes shone with a mysterious light, and her voice was calm but powerful. Eyamoja spared my life, she said, but I am no longer just a woman. I am her messenger now. Ayo ran to her, tears streaming down his face. Teni, you're alive, he cried. Teni smiled and said, yes, but Eyamoja's wrath is not over. There is still one last battle to fight. The villagers were confused. "What do you mean?" they asked. But before Teni could explain, a loud hiss echoed from the river. The python had returned, angrier and larger than before. Teni turned to Ayo and said, "Take sand from the riverbank and pour it on me. Only then will I have the power to fight the python." Ayo did as she said, his hands shaking as he scooped up the sand and gently poured it over her. A bright light surrounded Teni, and she transformed into a warrior with a staff that glowed like fire. She turned to face the python, her voice echoing like thunder as she said, "This ends now." The python hissed and surged forward, its massive body coiling around the trees and crashing through the water. Teni stood her ground, the fiery staff in her hand blazing brighter with every step she took. Ayo, watching from the riverbank, felt a surge of hope but also fear for Teni. The villagers, still kneeling, whispered prayers and held onto one another as the battle began. Teni swung her staff, sending a wave of fire toward the python. The creature roared in pain, its fiery eyes narrowing as it lunged at her. She dodged its attack with grace, each movement as fluid as the river itself. But the python was cunning. It dove into the water, disappearing from sight. The river became eerily calm, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, the python erupted from beneath the surface, aiming directly at Teni. Ayo couldn't stay still any longer. Grabbing a spear from a nearby villager, he ran toward the water. "Teni!" he shouted, his voice breaking with desperation. Teni glanced back at him, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "Stay back, Ayo. This is my fight," she said firmly. But Ayo refused to listen. He charged toward the python, his heart pounding. The villagers gasped as he leapt into the river, aiming the spear at the beast. As the spear struck the python's side, the creature let out a deafening roar, thrashing wildly. The river churned with fury as Teni and Ayo faced the monstrous serpent together. The python, enraged by the attack, lashed its tail, creating waves that threatened to overturn the canoe. Teni shouted to Ayo, "Distract it. I need one clear strike to end this." Ayo nodded and began splashing the water with his spear, shouting and waving to catch the python's attention. The serpent turned toward him, its fiery eyes locking onto his every movement. Teni seized the moment. Raising her staff high, she called out to Eyamoja herself. "Oh, great goddess, lend me your strength to save your people," she cried. The staff blazed brighter than ever, and with one swift motion, Teni struck the python's head. A burst of light erupted, blinding everyone for a moment. When the light faded, the python lay still, its massive body dissolving into the river. The water became calm, shimmering under the moonlight. The villagers cheered, their voices filled with relief and joy. Ayo swam to Teni and embraced her tightly, both of them exhausted but victorious. But as they stood there, a low rumble came from the riverbed. Teni's glowing eyes narrowed as she gazed into the depths. "This isn't over," she whispered. The river bubbled and churned once more, and an enormous shadow began to rise from its depths. A voice, ancient and thunderous, echoed across the land. "You dare defy me?" it roared. The villagers froze in terror as a massive figure emerged, Eyamoja herself, towering and radiant, her watery form shimmering with anger and power. "You have defeated my messenger, but your test is not yet complete," she declared, her voice shaking the earth. "Prove to me that your love and courage are strong enough to protect this village, or face the wrath of the river." Teni and Ayo stood together, their hands clasped tightly. The villagers watched in silence, their fates hanging in the balance as Eyamoja prepared her next challenge. Eyamoja raised her hands, summoning massive waves that crashed against the riverbanks. The villagers cried out, scrambling for safety. Teni stepped forward, her voice steady. "Goddess Eyamoja, we will prove ourselves to you," she said. Teni began to glow brighter, and Ayo, still holding her hand, felt a surge of courage. Together, they stepped into the river. Eyamoja watched them with a stern expression, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in her eyes. The couple knelt in the water and spoke with one voice. "Goddess, we do not defy you. We wish only to live in harmony, guided by love and respect. We offer you our unity as proof that even the strongest storms can be faced together." Eyamoja paused, her towering figure shimmering as the waves subsided. The goddess's eyes softened, and her voice was no longer filled with rage. "You have shown bravery and a pure heart," she said. "Your love has proven worthy. But remember, the river's wrath is a reminder of balance and respect for the sacred." With a wave of her hand, Eyamoja disappeared into the depths, and the river became calm once more. Teni and Ayo emerged from the water, hand in hand, as the villagers cheered. Peace returned to the village, and from that day on, they learned to honor the goddess with greater respect and to cherish the bonds that united them. Moral lesson: the story of Eyamoja teaches us the importance of respect for nature, unity, and love. It reminds us that courage and understanding can overcome even the most fearsome challenges when guided by a pure heart.